At the turn of the century, a young black boy who wanted a good education had to overcome almost impossible odds. This is the story of the youngest of 8 children of a poor South Carolina sharecropper, a boy who overcame them. And today, at 85 years of age, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays can look back on a life of remarkable accomplishment as an educator, a minister, and a man of honor. But Dr. Mays still looks forward. He is the respected president of the Atlanta, Georgia School Board and still serves on the boards of many other organizations. His sister taught him numbers and the alphabet, and he walks 7 miles a day to and from a one-room schoolhouse. Young Benny Mays surprised his teacher. He could read and write.
There's his funeral.
You got a spider.
Where? And the one thing I remember from Dr. Reynolds, what he said if I had the power, I would require every American to read Born to Rebel. Such an important social autobiography. But in there, Mays really describes what it was like when he was growing up, about y'all's age and even younger. He was born here, and he lived here until he was 17. How old are y'all?
I'm 10. 11.
We have 2 12-year-olds, okay. And he talks a lot about the conditions of Greenwood County, how the conditions were here and everything. It wasn't a very pretty picture. Mays talks a bit in the book about, he said, of course, he encountered racial discrimination many places he went, but he said it was never the depressing type as in Greenwood County. Wow. And he talks, tells several incidents that happened to him here, which is really kind of an ugly nature. And but he said even when he was like 5, 6 years old, he had this burning desire to get his education. And when he was probably about 12-year-old, 13-year-old, he was plowing. He said several times he would tie his mule to a tree and he'd go down and pray and ask the Lord to make a way for him to get his education. And his father was totally against him getting his education. And when Mays went to the brick house school till age 15, and then his pastor at the old Mount Zion Church, where Mays' home church was at, down in Epworth, he wanted him to go to the Baptist sponsored school in McCormick, it's down about 22 miles south of Greenwood. And Mays did. He went over there and took the train back and forth every day. And then after 2 years, he said it was the same old thing. There was nothing there for him. He'd done learned everything. He knew everything at the brick house school, and he wanted to go to high school. But there was no school in Greenwood for him to go to. But he had done some research, and he said he wanted to go to South Carolina State College at Orangeburg. They had a high school department in the college. And he told his dad, he said, I want to go to high school. And his father just was adamant he'd just stay right here and be a farmer. But finally his daddy relented and threw a $10 bill at him. Told him to go ahead. And Mays went on down to high school. And when he got down there, you know what grade he was assessed for? 8th grade. And he stayed down there for 5 years. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He was in high school for 5 years. And graduated, you know what? Not at age 17 or 18 like y'all graduated. He was 22 years old when he graduated from school because he was so far behind because of discrimination, because of farm requirements. Because when he was going to school at Brick House School in Greenwood, you know how many months a year he went? 4. November, December, January, February. Because in the early spring, like in March and April, they're planting crops, and then in the fall, they're harvesting crops. So it went through the winter time. And just to tell you a little story about how his father was so against him getting his education. When he went to high school, and he was down there for the first 2 years, his father made him come back to Epworth, to Greenwood, to work the farm and everything. And he did. He came back. And then on the 3rd year, his father sent for him. And Mays said, Dad, I'm 19 years old now. He went down there at age 17. In 2 years, he's 19. He said, Dad, I'm 19 years old now. And he says, if I don't stay here, I'll never finish school if I keep coming back to Greenwood working for him. You know what his dad told him? He said, well, I'll send the sheriff after you. And Mays wrote in his autobiography, he says, well, if he'd sent the sheriff, I'd had to go back. He said, luckily his dad didn't follow through on that promise. And he was able to stay down there, and he got a job with the Pullman Train Company. during the summer times as a porter up and down the east coast of the United States, working as a porter. Was able to earn some extra money for high school and probably for his first years of college. And but it caused a big problem with him and his dad. They were kind of had an estrangement. But he said he was really happy that later in life, after he got his doctorate degree, he was dean of religion at Howard University in Washington, and he said he was able to bring his dad to live with him for a couple of years while he was up there. And they kind of got over that problem. But you know, if he had listened to his father, you know what he'd been? He'd been a farmer his whole life. And there's nothing wrong with farming, a farmer, because all work's honorable. All work's honorable. But he wanted more out of life. But if he had listened to his dad, he'd have been a farmer in Epworth the rest of his life, and the world wouldn't have known the great things that he did. You know, he's an advisor to 3 U.S. presidents: President Kennedy, President Carter, President Johnson. He was particularly close to President Carter when Carter was in the governor's office, and when Carter became president, he was at the White House a good many times, with Carter. And he said of Kennedy, he said, "Few men in America have I admired as much as John Fitzgerald Kennedy." He thought the world of Kennedy, and he thought a lot of President Johnson also. And I have a good photograph in the museum. Y'all see it on the wall. When in 1963, President Kennedy appointed Dr. Mays and Vice President Johnson as the U.S. representatives to Rome, Italy, for the Pope's funeral. Pope Paul XXIII at the time. And so I have a photograph of Dr. Mays and Vice President Johnson on Air Force One in the sky, and there was a good picture of them having a one-on-one conversation.
Wow.
And but now, you know, he's also known as, y'all know he was a mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King, right? Y'all probably heard that. Well, you know, they were really close, and I've learned some things, and just in studying his life. Recently, I read in 1984 in a newspaper clipping when Mays died in 1984. Ambassador Young from Atlanta, Andrew Young, this is what he wrote in this paper. He said, "Martin Luther King used to say all the time that I was awakened spiritually and intellectually by listening to Dr. Mays at those Tuesday morning sermons. Every Tuesday, for 27 years, Dr. Mays would walk across the Morehouse College campus, and he'd preach to the students. And King said that he said that all the time, that I was awakened spiritually and intellectually by listening to Dr. Mays at those sermons, Tuesday morning sermons. And you know, King, you know how old he was when he went into the college?
Come on now.
Remember that? Remember we talked about that?
Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
King was 11th grader in high school, and he went into Morehouse College, 1944, right in the middle of World War II. And you know, he went in to become a lawyer, but by listening to Dr. Mays, those sermons, those Tuesday morning sermons, he decided to go into the ministry, decided to become a preacher. And he graduated in 48. And so, you know, that was a real close relation. And did you know that Dr. Mays is the one that preached King's funeral when King was killed in 68? It was Dr. Mays, the man from Greenwood, that preached King's funeral. And we have an original copy of the eulogy in the museum that his great-nephew, Dwight Powell from Washington, D.C., Reverend Powell, he's a minister, but he also works for the Library of Congress. And he called me one day last summer. He said, "I got something I want to donate to the museum." I said, what's that? And he said, "Well, at Mays' funeral, at King's funeral in 68 at Morehouse College, that's where the funeral was. He says, I was there on this platform up like this with a small reel-to-reel recorder. Oh, those old reel-to-reel recorders. And he says, I taped my uncle's eulogy to Dr. King. And he said he was going to offer it to the Smithsonian Institute. And he wanted us to have it. So all he wanted us to do is to digitize it and send him a CD, a digitized CD back. And when I sent out the Rice video to get it digitized, there were 6 other speeches on there. Phenomenal speeches. One, I play a lot to people coming through. 1966, he's in New York, he's giving his speech. And after this great introduction by Reverend Dr. Arthur Gray, who's known Mays for 40 years, Mays comes on and makes some light comments, and then he tells this great joke about a beautiful girl here in Epworth when he was growing up, as he says, for some unknown reason had never been married. She was reaching the age where they call him an old maid. His voice had gotten real deep, baritone voice. He talked real slow. It's something to hear. But in that speech, after this joke, he talks about how he wished every child under 5, 6 years old would develop a burning desire to be someone worthwhile in the world. He elaborates on that. Then the second theme in the speech is about how it's not how long we live, but how well. And he names, I'll bet, 75 or 80 people throughout history, from Julius Caesar to Jesus Christ to Galileo, that did their life's work when they were teenagers, 20s, 30s, when they were young. Oh, it's something to hear. It really is. Profound speech. But I could talk about Dr. Mays for a long time, and I love talking about Mays and telling you some things about his background, because I really would like for you to understand a little bit more about him than just that he was president of the college and he was a mentor to King and he was an advisor to three U.S. presidents. I kind of give you a little more detail background about Mays. Mays was a great individual. I like to say that he escaped this environment, this segregated Jim Crow environment, and became one of the greatest Americans of the 20th century. Born right here in Greenwood.
Amen. Awesome.
For the next quarter of a century, as president of Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Mays would counsel, instruct, and inspire an entire generation of young men and create an institution unsurpassed in its pursuit of academic excellence. His wife, Sadie, was at his side during those days, working with him to help him achieve his goals. Through the years, Dr. Mays has received hundreds of awards and honorary degrees. He has been active in the World Council of Churches, YMCA, UNESCO, and many other organizations. Today,
a man must ever strive to be better. He must never get to the point where he thinks he's arrived. He must never get to the point that he can relax now. There's always something more. For example, I've never given a speech that was completely satisfactory to me. Always reaching for something better, a better society, better black-white relations, better ministers in the pulpit. And I think that philosophy, if you want to call it a philosophy, keeps me living and keeps me going.
Few men have lived a life as full or as productive as the life of Benjamin Elijah Mays.